The meeting room felt like a pressure cooker. The air thick with the silent hum of failing technology and unspoken frustration. At the front of the room, a large screen glowed, flashing a single, ominous word in bold red letters: failed. 15 of the company's brightest engineers stood scattered around the long table. A sea of downcast eyes and tense shoulders. Papers were shuffled. Tablets were swiped. But no new answers emerged. At the head of it all stood Matt Bennett, the CEO and founder of Bennett Auto Tech. A man who looked like he was holding back a storm. His voice, when he finally spoke, was dangerously quiet. "Explain it to me again," he said. The words clipped. "And this time, explain it like I'm not the one who signs your paychecks." A younger engineer, barely out of college, cleared his throat, his eyes darting to his senior colleagues for support that never came. "Sir, we've checked every system. We've rebooted, rewired, run diagnostics on every line of code. We've tested it in every conceivable condition. Still, the car keeps drifting off its designated route. We just don't know why." "You don't know," Matt repeated, the words flat and cold as he folded his arms across his chest. His jaw was a tight line of steel. Another, more senior engineer, jumped in, hoping to soften the blow. "We suspect there's some kind of signal confusion. Perhaps interference from overlapping data sources in dense urban environments. It's a rare phenomenon. Difficult to predict. But it's the only theory we have." Matt ran a hand down his tired face. "So, let me get this straight. 15 of the most brilliant minds in this building have been working on this for 3 solid weeks. And the best you can give me is, maybe, and we think?" No one answered. The silence was an admission of defeat. He turned toward the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the gray clouds gather over the city skyline. A perfect mirror for the mood in the room. His company's biggest product launch, a revolutionary self-driving vehicle, was now on the verge of collapse. Investors were circling like vultures. And he knew the media wouldn't be far behind. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A simple text: "Nanny's here." Matt let out a sigh, the tension momentarily breaking. Without another word to his defeated team, he stepped out of the room. The atmosphere in the main lobby was a world away. Softer lights, less urgency. But the stress still clung to him like static. Standing near the entrance was Kelly. Her blonde hair pulled back in a simple, practical braid. Her coat still damp from the drizzle outside. She held the hand of a little girl in a bright yellow raincoat and boots that squeaked softly with each tiny, impatient step. "Just here to grab the house key," Kelly said, offering a small, apologetic smile. "We'll be out of your hair in a second." Matt handed it over without hesitation. "Thanks, Kelly." He then looked down at his daughter, Ava, 5 years old and beaming as if he were a superhero returning from battle. "Daddy," she said, tugging at the sleeve of his expensive suit. "Can I see the car? The new one? Please. Just for 1 minute." Matt hesitated, his mind still tangled in the boardroom's web of problems. But then Ava tilted her head and gave him that look, the one that was a perfect echo of her mother's, and his shoulders softened, the armor cracking just a little. 5 minutes. He relented. "Then you and Kelly are heading home." Ava's grin was pure sunshine. She grabbed Kelly's hand. And the three of them walked down the long corridor together. Past glass-walled offices and the curious glances of employees. They were heading toward the restricted R&D floor. The engineers they passed nodded stiffly at Matt. Their gazes barely registering the woman and child with him. To them, she was just the nanny. No one noticed her. Not yet. But in just a few minutes, Kelly would become the one name no one in that building could stop talking about. The R&D floor was quiet but not calm. The unresolved tension from the meeting hung in the air. A ghost lingering between the quiet tapping of keyboards and the low hum of servers. In the center of the vast space sat the prototypey, a sleek, futuristic vehicle that was supposed to be their triumph but was now their shame. Ava, a bundle of pure energy, ran straight for it. "Is this the one that drives all by itself?" she asked, her eyes wide with wonder. "Mostly," Matt replied, crouching beside her, a weary smile touching his lips. "It's supposed to. But sometimes it gets a little confused. Like me when it's past my bedtime," Ava said with profound seriousness. Kelly let out a soft laugh. And even Matt's smile became genuine. He stood and pointed toward a massive wall display where a digital map tracked the car's last disastrous test run. A spiderweb of colored lines showed every turn, every stop, and every inexplicable deviation. Kelly didn't say anything at first. She simply stood a few steps back, her hands in her coat pockets, her expression thoughtful. Her eyes moved slowly across the complex diagram, taking in the patterns of failure. Where 15 engineers saw chaos, she seemed to see a story. And then, in a voice barely louder than a whisper, she spoke. "Have you considered multipath interference?" Matt turned, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" Kelly shifted slightly, as if suddenly aware she had overstepped. "Well," she began, choosing her words carefully. "In urban canyons, with all the tall buildings, signals from GPS satellites can bounce around. It can create ghost sources. The car might be receiving valid data from multiple towers almost simultaneously." She pointed to a specific cluster of errors on the map. "It might not be broken. It might just be confused because no one programmed a hierarchy for it to decide which signal to trust." The room froze. A few nearby engineers who had been pretending not to listen looked up, their faces etched with disbelief, then dawning comprehension. One of them slowly walked over to the screen, his eyes tracing the path Kelly had indicated. "Wait a minute. That could be it," he murmured, his voice filled with a reverence that hadn't been there a moment before. Matt stepped forward, his fatigue replaced by a sudden surge of adrenaline. "Pull up the signal logs for those coordinates. Now." Within moments, new data flooded the screen. Everyone gathered around, watching as the lead engineer isolated the exact moments the car had faltered. And there it was, clear as day. In every single instance of failure, the car's system was trying to process two distinct, conflicting signals arriving at nearly the same microsecond. They hadn't seen it because they were looking for a flaw in their own code, not a logic problem in how the car interpreted the outside world. The vehicle wasn't malfunctioning. It was being given two right answers at once, with no instructions on how to choose. Kelly had seen it. Not after weeks of analysis. Not with a team and millions of dollars in equipment. But in less than 30 seconds. She's right. The lead engineer said. His voice quiet with awe. That's it. That's the root of the entire problem. The silence that followed was different this time. It wasn't tense. It was stunned. Every eye in the room turned to Kelly. Not with doubt. But with a profound, humbling respect. Matt stared at her. A dozen questions swirling behind his eyes. How? How did you know that? Kelly hesitated. Looking down at her shoes. I used to work in navigation systems. For aerospace applications. It was a while ago. It wasn't much of an explanation. But it was a start. Then Ava, ever honest and ever proud, spoke up with a triumphant grin. Told you she was super smart. Daddy. Matt couldn't take his eyes off Kelly. He had always known she was reliable, thoughtful, and wonderful with his daughter. But this wasn't a lucky guess. This was deep, practiced, institutional knowledge. And for the first time in a very long time, Matt Bennett, the man who was always 10 steps ahead of everyone else, was completely and utterly caught off guard. Kelly looked down, clearly uncomfortable under the sudden weight of all that attention. I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to interrupt. I saw something I couldn't unsee. You didn't interrupt. Matt said slowly. His voice laced with a new kind of wonder. You solved it. Behind him, the room erupted. The engineers were already at their keyboards. A wave of excited chatter and renewed hope washing over the lab as they began coding the fix. Kelly, meanwhile, knelt to Ava's level, brushing a stray strand of hair from the little girl's forehead, acting as if she hadn't just saved a billion-dollar project with a single quiet observation. Matt stood a few feet away, still watching her. No resume on his desk. No fancy title. No credentials on paper. And yet, she saw what 15 of his hand-picked experts had missed. He had no idea what other secrets she kept. But he was suddenly sure of one thing. This woman, his daughter's quiet, unassuming nanny, was by far the most brilliant person in the room. That night, Matt sat at his desk. The glittering city skyline stretching out beyond his office window. But his gaze was fixed on the file open on his computer. It wasn't a business proposal or a quarterly report. It was a background check. One he had commissioned with a single, urgent phone call. Kelly Morgan. Age, 28. Graduate of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. Dual degrees with honors in aerospace engineering and computer science. Employed for 3 years at a leading aeronautics firm. Working on satellite guidance systems. Then, 2 years ago, she vanished from the industry. No scandal. No headlines. Just gone. Now she was a nanny, living in a modest apartment on the other side of the city. No public profile. No LinkedIn. No trace of her former life. It made no sense. And that only made Matt more determined to understand. He asked her to stay a little later that evening, after Ava was tucked into bed. As the house settled into a deep quiet, they sat at the kitchen table, 2 mugs of tea steaming between them. I looked into your background, he said. Deciding honesty was the only path forward. Kelly didn't flinch. She just nodded, taking a slow sip of her tea. I figured you would. I don't normally investigate my daughter's nannies. I'm not a usual nanny, she replied softly. A statement of fact, not arrogance. Matt leaned forward. Why? Kelly. Why did you leave a field you were obviously born for? She was quiet for a long moment, her gaze distant. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, but it carried the weight of memory. My mom passed away. It was very sudden. A stroke. I was 25. It had always been just the three of us, me, my mom, and my younger brother, Leo. He was 12 at the time. She took a breath. A few months after we lost her, Leo was in an accident. A car hit his bike. Severe spinal damage. He spent months in the hospital, and nearly a year in rehab just to learn how to walk again. I had to be there for him. I was all he had left. Her voice remained calm, devoid of self-pity. My job. They were sympathetic at first. They offered part-time hours. But it came with a guilt trip. There was this constant pressure. This unspoken expectation that I'd get over it and come back to being the star employee who worked 80-hour weeks. She finally looked up, her eyes meeting his. But Leo's life wasn't normal anymore. He needed me. And I refused to be the person who chose algorithms over her own brother. Matt listened, completely captivated. So, I left, she said with a simple shrug. I found work that let me keep him close. Quiet work. Consistent work. Nannying seemed like a step down to most people. But it gave me time. It gave us peace. And honestly, after everything, I just liked being around kids again. There was no drama in her telling. No bitterness. Just the quiet, unshakable truth of a woman who had made an impossible choice and had learned to live with it. Matt looked at her. Truly looked at her. And saw a strength that dwarfed the power-hungry ambition he was used to in his world. Kelly didn't need to impress anyone. And somehow, that made her the most impressive person he'd ever met. You could have gone back by now, he said gently. With your mind, your credentials, companies would be lining up. She offered a faint, sad smile. Maybe someday. But for now, Leo is my priority. My work is helping him heal. Matt stared down into his mug. He had built his entire empire by chasing results, demanding perfection, and controlling every variable. But here sat someone who had willingly walked away from it all, from recognition, from money, from prestige, not because she failed, but because she valued something more. Family. Peace. Purpose. He glanced up, his voice softer now. You didn't even blink in that lab today. You knew exactly what you were looking at. Some things, she said with a soft shrug, never leave you. He nodded, watching the way her eyes softened when she spoke of her brother. The way her fingers curled around her mug as if for an anchor. It was a quiet, steady strength. And for a man accustomed to the noise of boardrooms and data, it was utterly disarming. He didn't say it aloud, but the thought was crystal clear in his mind. I have never met anyone who chose to do the right thing without needing a single person to praise them for it. And in that quiet realization, something deep inside him shifted. It wasn't just admiration anymore. It was respect. The kind that starts in the soul and grows without permission. The next day, Matt called Kelly into his office. "I want you on the team," he said. Straight to the point. Consulting. Part-time. Flexible hours. Name your price. Just come help us. Kelly hesitated. "Matt, I appreciate the offer. I really do. But I'm not looking to go back to that world. Not yet." "Why not?" he pressed. A hint of his usual frustration creeping in. She gave him a patient half-smile. "Because my life isn't just about my own achievements right now. I have Leo. And I have Ava. Sometimes quiet is more valuable than a promotion." That should have been the end of it. But that night, as Matt was tucking Ava into bed, she handed him a crayon drawing. It was a lopsided sketch of the prototype car, with 3 stick figures beside it. One was labeled Daddy. Another me. And standing proudly next to the car was a smiling woman with a ponytail. Under bold letters scrolled by a 5-year-old, "This is Kelly." She made the car smart again. Matt chuckled. "She did. Didn't she?" Ava nodded proudly. "You should let her fix more stuff, Daddy." The next morning, Kelly walked back into Matt's office, the folded drawing in her hand. Ava made a very strong case. She said with a small smile, 3 days a week. No official title. And absolutely no press. Matt nodded once, a grin spreading across his face. "Deal." And just like that, Kelly Morgan, former aerospace engineer and current nanny, became the quiet, guiding force behind a project that had nearly shattered the company. She didn't grandstand or take over. She simply joined the team, sitting with the young engineers, patiently explaining complex system dynamics in a way that made everyone feel smarter, not smaller. Her logic was crisp. Her instincts were surgical. And her presence was calming. "You think in systems," Matt observed one afternoon, after watching her solve a major connectivity issue in under 10 minutes. "I think in people," she replied without looking up from her screen. Machines just happen to listen faster. Outside of work, something else began to shift. Something warm and unexpected. Dinners happened together more often. Matt would read stories to Ava while Kelly prepped meals for the next day. Their lives began to weave together in a comfortable, unspoken rhythm. One evening, Kelly started teaching Ava basic coding, turning it into a game. "Make the cat chase the butterfly," she'd whisper. "But only if the butterfly is wearing a red hat." Matt watched from the doorway, arms crossed, a genuine, unforced grin on his face. It was the first time in years he had felt the quiet, steady hum of a happy home. Later that night, as he watched Kelly and Ava asleep in a chair, a book fallen between them, he found himself looking at her not as an employee or a nanny, but as the other half of something he hadn't realized was missing. They were building something. Not just a car, but a warmth, a belonging, a family. And for the first time in a very long time, Matt Bennett wasn't afraid to find out where the road would lead. The story broke on a Tuesday morning. A leak from someone on the inside. Painting a dramatic, sensationalized tale. From nanny to tech savior, the hidden genius behind Bennett Auto's billion-dollar car. CEO's quiet hero solves what 15 engineers couldn't. The internet exploded. Reporters staked out the building. Kelly was horrified. She sat in Matt's office. Her arms wrapped around herself. Her face pale. "This isn't what I wanted," she whispered. Her voice strained. "I didn't ask for any of this." Matt looked at the woman who had only ever wanted peace and saw that the world was trying to take it from her. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said. His voice firm and protective. "And I'm not going to let them make you feel like you did." That afternoon, he called an all-hands meeting, with Kelly standing nervously at the side of the stage. He stepped up to the podium. "By now, you've all seen the headlines," he began, his voice ringing with authority and sincerity. "But headlines only tell the part of the story that gets clicks. I want to tell you the truth." He recounted the project's near failure and then gestured toward Kelly. "Her name is Kelly Morgan. And she's not just a hero to this company. She's a hero in life. She once had a brilliant career in front of her. But she walked away from it all to care for her family when they needed her most. She stepped away not because she lacked ambition, but because she had the courage to choose love over accolades." He met Kelly's gaze across the room. A silent promise passing between them. "Today," Matt announced, his voice swelling with pride, "we're not just thanking her. We're honoring her spirit. Bennett Auto Tech is launching the Leo Scholarship Fund, named for Kelly's younger brother. It will provide full financial support to students in STEM fields who have had to pause their education to act as caregivers. Because we know now that the brightest minds don't always come in the most polished packages." A ripple of applause started, then grew into a standing ovation. And finally, Matt said with a wide smile, "It is my great honor to officially welcome our new Chief Systems Strategy Advisor, Kelly Morgan." The applause was deafening. But for the first time, Kelly didn't shrink from it. She stood a little taller, a tentative smile gracing her lips. She wasn't a secret anymore. She was seen. A year later, the world of Bennett Auto Tech was transformed. But more importantly, the world inside Matt's home was healed. Leo, walking with a confidence that seemed impossible just a year ago, now spent his weekends in the R&D lab, tinkering with simulators under Matt's proud supervision. The Leo Scholarship Fund had already helped a dozen students return to their dreams. One evening, as the house settled into its familiar, peaceful quiet, Matt found Kelly in the kitchen, rinsing out tea mugs. He came to stand beside her, taking a dish towel and drying the cup she'd just washed. He leaned against the counter, his expression soft and serious. "I've been thinking," he said. She glanced over, a playful light in her eyes. "That sounds dangerous." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. Not a diamond, not a flashy spectacle, but a simple, elegant silver band, warm from his touch. "I've spent my life building things, Kelly," he said, his voice steady and full of a love that needed no announcement. "Cars, a company. But none of it feels as real or as important as what we've built right here, in this house." He took her hand, his thumb gently stroking her palm. "Let's stop being a team and start being a family. Officially." Tears welled in Kelly's eyes. But they were tears of joy. Of relief. Of coming home. She didn't need a grand proposal. She had lived their love story every single day. She simply nodded. A radiant smile breaking through the tears. Yes. She whispered. Let's build a life. Their story, which began with a broken machine, found its happy ending not with the roar of a new engine or the flash of cameras, but in the quiet, steady rhythm of a family bound by choice. They were a testament to the fact that sometimes the greatest innovations aren't made of metal and code, but of kindness, courage, and the quiet strength of a heart that knows what truly matters. If this story touched your heart, please show your support by giving it a like, sharing it with someone who might need a lift, and subscribing to soul-stirring stories. We are dedicated to bringing you real, emotional, and life-changing stories that heal, that inspire, and that remind us of the incredible power of the human spirit. Until next time, keep believing in love, in grace, and in the beautiful possibility of second chances.